Welcome to the Sport and Crypto podcast, where we talk to leaders in sports and Web3. Joining me on this episode, our second ever virtual episode, is Derrick Ko, CEO and co-founder of Matchday. How's it going, man?
Good. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. I know we've been talking about it for a while and finally be able to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, we wrote about Matchday back when you raised and launched the product, where Lionel Messi's venture arm were a participator in your round, which made a ton of headlines back in the day. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about what exactly Matchday is for those that don't know about it?
Yeah, so we believe that football fans want more ways to express their passion for the sport, right? So typically fans today watch 1 to 2 live matches a week during the regular season, probably a domestic league and a European league midweek. And to engage with the sport kind of outside of it, you're thinking about, okay, I'll play the actual sports on the field on Sunday, or play a virtual representation of the sport, like the most popular being, of course, EA Sports FC, which is a $70 console game. But the fact is that there are 5 billion football fans around the world. This is a number that's been provided by FIFA. And there's not going to be one game or experience that captures the imagination of every football fan, right? So we believe there's an opportunity to engage at least 150 million fans daily. If you think about like kind of the spectrum of interactive entertainment / games for football fans right now, they're probably hitting maybe about 10 million DAU out of this 150 million potential. So that kind of fueled like our mission behind Matchday, which is to connect the world's 5 billion football fans. And we do so by building what we call the Matchday universe. Ultimately, an expansive ecosystem of games that live in this kind of shared universe, sharing the same set of building blocks. So that sounds like jargony and everything, but imagine being able to take footballers, cards of footballers, stadiums, kits that you have earned in, let's say, a casual game that you have been playing on your phone on the way back from work on the bus. And when you're back home, you sit in front of your TV, load up your PS, and bring all those same things and items and players that you've learned into, let's say, an action center you're going to play. And it's this kind of interoperability and that we're looking for to create across games, and we want to enable that in the Matchday universe. So it has been a really personal journey for me starting Matchday. Growing up, I didn't have cable TV. I got hooked to international club football actually through video games, starting with FIFA 96. And up to this day, I'm still a huge FIFA player. That's actually how I became a lifelong Man United fan, all through games. And since then, I've played all genres of football games, from FIFA to PES, and more hours of Football Manager than I care to admit. Fun fact is I'm actually in the top 10K for Fantasy Premier League. So my career took me through the world of startups and into hyper-competitive industries. The first company I was at was acquired by Lyft, where I was on the growth team pre-IPO. And then I led to start a company called Spin, where we build electric scooters on the streets around the world. After I left, my co-founders and I got together and hatched Matchday. I mean, we built an amazing team of game veterans. My co-founder Seb was on the founding team of Glue Mobile, which IPO'd, and he then went on to start Playfish, which was acquired by EA. And fundamentally, we believe there's an opportunity to have even more football fans play video games, and for us to recreate that magic that I experienced as a kid by connecting football's 5 billion fans through games. I actually first got interested in the blockchain in 2018. I was fascinated by it from a technological standpoint, and I started dabbling in building smart contracts on Ethereum for fun. And since then, I've always been fascinated by new behaviors and products that the blockchain could enable. And in our case, it's bringing the nostalgia of fan collectibles into digital experiences. So with starting Matchday, it gave me the opportunity to go full circle, bring together my interests and love for football, gaming, and blockchain.
And so let's dig a little bit deeper into the weeds then, right? So Matchday Universe, what exactly are the components in the solar system that make up the universe? That was a terrible analogy. Clearly, I wasn't cut out for astrophysics, but tell us exactly what that means.
Yeah, so you talk about the core components of, let's say, a shared universe. You're talking about building blocks, right? So they're asset-based building blocks like items, right? Any game's web items. You have your currencies, you have your in-game tangible items, in our case, football cards. Football cards underpin a lot of things, a lot of different experiences, because all football fans ultimately want to build their squad. And we also think about stuff like that go beyond necessarily the building blocks, but also providing things for developers, ourselves and third-party developers, such as authentication, in-game asset standards for other kind of in-game assets you want to introduce, shared ecosystem, currencies, payment methods, and all these kind of things. So we really think of it as building blocks, right? And probably a better analogy than the solar system analogy is like, think about what Roblox has done for as both a first-party game, but also a third-party platform for developers wanting to build within an ecosystem of constraints. And in our case, we want to create an ecosystem of constraints around football, provide interoperability between one game and another through a shared language of things that the players love and can bring from one game to another.
And so when we talk about the game itself currently, which is primarily a mobile game where people create their own squads using player cards, could you go into a little bit more of the weeds on how that game is exactly playable? And then I'd love to talk a little bit more about how you plan to create that more universe effect that you just mentioned.
Yeah, for sure. So in the Matchday universe, like you can't start a ecosystem without jump-starting it with users and with items and with a game. And that's why the first game in the Matchday universe that we built is Matchday Champions, which is now available globally in soft launch. And this is kind of genesis behind it. We looked at the market and we realized that there is no casual game for football fans. When I talk about casual games, I think about games like Monopoly Go, Royal Match, Coin Master, and even to some extent Clash Royale. So you're talking about simple game loots with addictive meta layers that are layered on them that drive repeated engagement and monetization. So and these are the games that we were heavily inspired by when we developed Matchday Champions. So fundamentally, we wanted to create a new genre of games. We're talking about casual games for sports fans, and specifically in this case, casual games for football fans. What that means is we take top IP. We have an excellent partner in FIFPro, for example. They are the world's football player union. And we mesh it together with highly effective casual game mechanics to create Matchday Champions. So we're talking about like dead simple to learn gameplay, snackable gameplay that means very easy, short session times while still remaining authentically football. I mean, we talk about authentically football. That's so important because when you talk about building a football game using real IP, it needs to feel authentically football. And that was one of actually our core values here, because in fact, some of our core team members have spent over a decade working on Ultimate Team, and they've since joined Matchday and are fueling the build of Matchday Champions. So yeah, many football games with licenses typically focus on action sims or having players run around the pitch, giving you some degree of control over them. We want to get away from that because those are great games. Trust me, I love those games. But I'm looking for something like, what can I play within 2 minutes when I'm on transit, for example, right? So the core loop fundamentally is you build your squad, you compete to earn rewards, you use the rewards to build up your collection of favorite footballers, which will improve your squad, and the loop repeats. Very, very simple core loop. You don't even have to learn how to control players on a pitch.
Makes total sense. And I'm sure everyone's kind of nodding in terms of understanding the core Matchday Champions game. Feels very much like, to me, the old, when you used to be able to log into your foot account from your computer, not having, and that was like half the time I spent playing FIFA Ultimate Teams wasn't actually like playing the sim game itself. It was like trading cards, collecting them,
trading,
like
squad building.
Yeah, squad
collection
building. That's
building.
like 70% of the game. So like you've to some extent recreated bits and elements of that, ripped out the sim part of it. And so Matchday Champions, as we mentioned, is the core game. How well has that done so far?
Yeah, so I mean, we have in our soft launch, we have had over 12 million matches played, over 20 million football cards in our players' hands, and we're seeing over 35 minutes of daily playtime per user. And to give you a sense of scale, our core match loop it takes under 2 minutes to complete. So people are playing a lot of matches and engaging heavily in the game. And since we're building a new genre of a football game, I like to always think about it in terms of like a revenue-related metric, right? Because to me, it's the best proxy of product market fit. And to give you a sense of that, basically every time we spend more on marketing, for example, we earn that back within a week, which shows that the game is monetizing well. So we're really happy as performance. Of course, there are tons of things more that we want to introduce into this game, including new card additions, new live events, and so on. But really happy where it is and where it's going.
That's pretty incredible. I mean, the 35-minute gameplay per user per day is pretty nuts. And you know, if you're getting your marketing spend back in a week, that's also pretty awesome. Have most of the players come from presumably non-crypto backgrounds? It's just been like your casual soccer fan?
Yeah, and that was actually by design, because when we started Matchday, we're like, how can we tackle this industry in a way that makes sense to us? And the first thing we wanted to do is to focus on fun, building a fun game, building a fun experience, because that is what's going to have a lasting effect on making the universe a success, but also just making sense from a business perspective. So we really focus on the fun, and not only do we want to create a fun game, it needs to be in itself a sustainable economy that can live without being Web3 driven. And that's what we set out to do with Matchday Champions. So that is, and once we have that, now adding Web3 elements to it, tokenizing certain aspects of the economy, all becomes a lot more straightforward. Once you have a heavily tuned machine in order to do that.
I want to come back to that tokenizing the kind of economy, because that's a hot topic that I've written about a lot and talked about a lot. First of all, let's take a step back a little bit into the Matchday universe side of things. You've got Matchday Champions. It's doing really, really well. You've got a heavily monetized audience. Marketing spend is getting paid back. 35 minutes per user per day. 12 did you say 12 million games logged or tens of millions?
12 million matches played, yeah.
Which is pretty amazing. What are the now stepping stone bits that get you into that more universe bit? Because I guess the holy grail for Web3 games or gaming ecosystem is that you have a core game, but people can go and take those cards and go elsewhere with them. I know that the likes of SoRare and Top Shot and a bunch of other games and NFT products or fancy games have promised that, but have actually found it very difficult to do. One, in terms of incentivizing those third parties. Two, in terms of funding new games and cannibalizing their own audiences. And then three, sometimes, there's a licensing blocker there where you're like, hey, Thief Pro, we're about to go build this other thing. And they're like, whoa, I thought we only agreed to Matchday Champions. So I'm really, really interested to hear how you go about doing that.
Yeah, so let's start at a high level, right? So I think being able for us, I think what we have working in our advantage is that we have a universe of what I call fixed lore, right? So you won't have the issue of, for example, bringing a lightsaber into a medieval MMO RPG when you are trying to promote interoperability of in-game items within the same ecosystem, but through different games. Whereas in football, you have established rules of order that have been created by the real-life game. So if you bring a Messi from one game, let's say Matchday Champions, into, let's say, a hyper-casual penalty kick game that exists on Telegram, or a AAA action sim that exists on your console, it is a very, very clear expectation of how Messi should perform in each of those environments. And likewise, if you're bringing the limited edition kits you got in Matchday Champions, and you want to outfit them in any of these games, that's a very clear expectation of how they should show up. Same with stadiums, same with all kinds of other vanity items. So that's a benefit of having constraints. When you talk about interoperable universe, that's a benefit of having constraints and kind of fixed lore around it. Allows for actually a lot more creativity to happen, because you don't always have to question, is this okay? That's a set expectation. So that's how we think about kind of like the high level, which makes this very, very possible. So I think you talk about expanding universe, right? I think that's one of the things that you touched on. So it will happen in really two ways. One, games that we continually build that are complementary to our existing product offerings. But I think what's even more exciting is the games that other people will build. And the way I look at it in the future is that games are essentially yet another form of user-generated content creators, right? Especially like I think in the era we're about to enter of AI-driven vibe coding, where games and experiences, highly engaging experiences, can be built so much quicker, especially when provided the right tools. It's going to become a big thing. And that's also a part of what Matchday Universe provides. You talk about APIs, you talk about native interoperability by reading out the blockchain programmatically, for example. This will enable creators to keep building all kinds of different experience, whether it's like something as simple as analysis tools like we had in FUT, for example, to actually full-blown, let's say, card trading games that can exist using the constructs and building blocks that Matchday Universes provides, whether it's through APIs that we build, let's say for Web2-centric developers, or Web3 native developers can read off-chain. So it's really, at the end of the day, it's really about content, right? We want to be a platform that's able to drive content. We'll build some of that content. We'll partner to build some more content. And we will, at the same time, also want to encourage anyone to continue building with the building blocks we're able to provide.
How difficult is it to ensure, and I don't know how to ask this question, but like at the end of the day, you're a business, right? You want to drive revenue from your users. How difficult is it to have that Goldilocks effect where that universe is generating enough revenue that goes back into Matchday's core product and pockets eventually, that also keeps those third parties afloat, if that makes sense, without cannibalizing the existing revenue that you're making from your own users, if that makes sense? What I'm trying to say, if people are offended by us nerding out this far into like game economies, is if you imagine I'm a user on Matchday and I spend $10 a month on building my squad and competing against other people, all of a sudden someone creates another product in this universe using Matchday's kind of building blocks that Derrick's kind of described. They create another game. Let's call it, a Matchday slot machine. That's a really crap example. Obviously why I'm not a game developer here. And I suddenly start using 3 of those $10 a month on that slot machine instead of using those $3 on Matchday. How do you kind of think about it from that perspective?
Well, I think from a long-term standpoint, right, we look at Matchday as an ecosystem platform company, much like how we have seen game studios make that transition, like where you've seen how Steam was created, how Roblox made a transition, how Unreal has done with UEFN. So this transition and likewise the shift in business model puts you at a different level where, you know what, I just have to figure out how to monetize transactions, users at a platform level, and make the best game win, right? Because I'm still ultimately getting the revenue into Matchday as a company, and also just as importantly, redistributing the revenue out to other games that are being built on the platform as well. No matter whether you're a big developer or just an indie developer who's just vibe coding.
That makes total sense. It's kind of like that, I think it was Robbie Young from Animoca who answered a similar question with when things started getting manufactured in China, everyone thought that the producers of those items would start making less money, and that America and the West would make less money. Actually, they made a lot more money because they were able to manufacture things cheaper, bring them over, sell them to customers who were able to pay a lot of money. And also the items they sold in China, they made a lot of money from because that population spent a lot of money on those products. And so I kind of sometimes think of it crudely in the same way, in the sense that if you can grow the pie and keep the people within that pie, then eventually, if there is some short-term pain of the $10 a month Pet spends on Matchday a month becomes $5, but eventually that becomes $35 within the entire ecosystem, and 15 of that's at Matchday Champions or goes back into Matchday's pockets, then that makes total sense. Total sense.
And that requires a business model shift, right? And that requires, it's not something that can be done overnight. And looking at all, I think, kind of the best platform/ecosystem companies out there, it takes time. And you need to slowly build ways to get people into the universe, right? And so in our case, we jump-started with Matchday Champions, and then we think about Title 2, Title 3 that we would build, for example, or we'll work with someone else to bring on board.
And what's the timeline looking for that? When do you expect to have a proliferation of titles and ecosystem partners in the space?
Yeah, I think that it's kind of two-pronged, right? One is that we want to, given it's such a new ecosystem, we want to manage on the quality side, but at the same time, we also want to show that, okay, you know what, we still provide building blocks for the more independent developer. So I think you'll see both going at somewhat different velocities, and we're talking about overall our Matchday Universe effort is something that we'll be working on in the next 18 to 24 months, and with various big milestones along the way.
I want to ask you a little bit about building now versus building when you first raised, which was a time where NFT-based businesses were valued at much bigger valuations, and there was a kind of never-ending excitement and euphoria about this new thing as a medium, and this new technology as a medium for IP and content. And I think those valuations in a lot of instances, not specifically with Matchday, but many other instances, probably ran away from what was realistic in terms of being able to sell NFTs as a business to grow into that valuation. Or they were done at, we've just done $100 million a month in revenue in NFT sales, and you've extrapolated that
right in the mints and all that.
Yeah. To kind of raise off of that, which I don't know. I don't know if it's the smartest thing to do. Looking back on it, is there anything you would have done differently? And then my follow-up question is have you had to do much differently or pivot the product and strategy with the kind of NFT market going down in mind? Or has that been completely agnostic for you because you're not really targeting collectors, so to speak, you're just targeting football fans?
Yeah, so actually football fans, a large part of football fans are collectors. I think if you think about it, I'm a big football fan. I collect things, whether it's Panini cards, kits, even when I go to a game, even the Matchday booklets that they have in football games. So inherently, I think the collection behavior is a big part of a fan experience. And then I think that's why collection-driven mechanics and games are so powerful and so important to build upon. And that's why you've seen the success of FUT. You've seen the success of that we are seeing with Champions, because it touches the very, I think, raw part of the fan experience that's so common to fans of football and any sport, right? But to go back to your question about the winter and strategy, so when we first started building Matchday, we always think about the kind of company we want to build. And the kind of company we want to build is that, yes, we could kind of take the, at that time, very common playbooks to do a mint, do a token release, create a roadmap and execute with a roadmap. But in our case, what we wanted to do was take I'd say the more boring approach of, I just want to build a fun game first. Let's build a fun game. Let's build a game that people would play, whether you are a casual mobile gamer or you are a Web3 enthusiast. So that's what we did. So like I said, we focused on first creating a fun game with a sustainable economy, independent of any Web3 drivers. And then tactically, it's like, let's also build a universal platform that underpins this game, which we call the Matchday universe. Partly because it sets us on the path to actually realizing our long-term vision, but more short-term tactically and selfishly, by building these building blocks, it lets us iterate on the kind of game we want to build. Like, game making is hard. Building a game that can actually stick, that earns money, that draws users is very hard, and you need a few iterations. We went through a few iterations of doing so as well. So that's what we focus on, right? We kind of blocked it nice and said, let's create a fun game. Let's create the underpinnings and the foundations in order to first power this fun game and then be able to extend it to other games. And we actually were building as things were kind of crashing. So you can always say hindsight is 2020, but I think taking the strategy that we took ultimately didn't result in us needing to pivot in any case.
Do you think your background being purely Web 2, I hate when people say Web 2 or Web 3, your background, which is really interesting, by the way, I know we didn't go into it straight away.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. Yeah.
But you were at Lyft, you then sold Spin, a micromobility company to Ford. Do you think that the background that you had there kind of made you look at what is a completely different world and ecosystem and market and have a much more long-term view of like company and game building as well?
Yeah, I think it's always things, I like to approach it from like kind of first principles, right? Like in this case, like what do we want? Like going back to company objective, what are we trying to do? We are trying to connect the world's 5 billion football fans. And how we want to bring technologies like blockchain into the fold is we look at them as what can this technology enable us. Okay, let me rephrase that. Like, when we think about bringing blockchain technologies into the fold, it's about trying to understand what new user behaviors a technology like blockchain can introduce into our ecosystem. So things like trustless ownership, interoperability, all these kind of things that it's excellent at underpinning. So I don't really look at it as like a question about long-term and short-term strategy, but rather that what is the best way for us to fulfill our mission, which is ultimately to connect 5 billion football fans.
Well, from connecting to fans to connecting you to our sponsors, we will take a quick break here to hear from them, and we'll move on to part 2 afterwards. I'm happy to remind you that this podcast is sponsored by the HBAR Foundation. The most beloved sports brands understand that what fans want is simple, a reason to be passionate. The HBAR Foundation enables brands and fans to share their passion on-chain using the Hedera network, the most used sustainable enterprise-grade DLT for the decentralized economy. Visit linkedin.com/company/HBAR Foundation to learn more and get the latest HBAR Foundation and Hedera network news. This podcast is also supported by Credenza. Credenza harnesses blockchain technology to power a real-time data synchronization platform that transforms customer data ecosystems. They make data more relevant and actionable for sports brands, teams, leagues, and IP owners. Find out more at credenza3.com. Welcome back to the show. I want to double click on something that you mentioned, Derrick. I think you said something along the lines of when you have a highly monetized and engaged user base, it's much easier to create a tokenized economy. And I said, definitely need to talk about that later on the show. And then here we are. I think there's been a big push from a lot of games to have their own tokens, which I think has been pushed from VCs and so on and so forth for obvious reasons. And that has sometimes led to not have the most sustainable ecosystem, because as soon as the token goes down, there's just sometimes not enough sinks to kind of keep it afloat. People can trade it on third-party marketplaces, on decentralized exchanges, which means that, you know, I could go and trade a game token that I don't even play, and I don't even play the game, which is kind of a bit weird to think about if you're just playing the game. And if you, Derrick, were playing that game and you earn the token, you wake up and say, oh, it's worth half of what it was yesterday, and it's all because Pet went and bought a load of the token when it was low and then sold a lot of it. That seems a bit weird to gamers, right? So I'm curious, has it ever entered your mind to go down that route of like, oh, we'll have our own Matchday token? I'm presuming that's kind of what you meant from the tokenization perspective. And if not, why not go down that route?
Yeah, I think you touch on it exactly, right? If you think about our goal here, which is we want to make sure that anyone can play our games, right? Whether you're Web3, Web2, mobile game, whatever the case is, right? Me as a player, I shouldn't have my player experience affected by what one part of the economy decides to do. And I think that that's really important, because when I think about I'm fascinated by blockchain technologies. I think that Web3 gaming has a very strong future once you're able to get it right. It's going to take a while to get it right. And what's important, I think the best thing we can do at this time as kind of game makers are to use games as a way to onboard many more people onto Web3, whether they know it or not, right? And I think there are a lot of games out there that are doing that. For example, you see Gunzilla's Off the Grid, excellent game, AAA extraction shooter, and you can play it without even knowing what a token is or knowing any of the underlying effects. And I'm quite sure that over time, and much like we think about it, we'll want to start exposing the benefits of and kind of ecosystem benefits and potentially even certain gameplay benefits to these users, which starts creating a different level of depth of engagement with Matchday itself. So to us, it's what we create needs to work for the mass audience. It needs to make sense to the mass audience. So we want to start from that. And when you talk about tokenizing, when I think about tokenizing, the first thing is like, what's the most important thing to tokenize? And I think that things that we look at potentially tokenizing, for example, are your assets, because these are assets. Like we firmly believe that if you're acquiring assets in a game, you should own them, right? And what blockchain provides is trustless ownership record of whether you have acquired a certain item, and likewise gives you control to go trade it wherever you wish. So we first think about it as in terms of the in-game assets to start up with. And then, of course, there's a question about the fungible tokens, right? The currencies and so on. And that's something that we are thinking about, but you got to be very, very careful about how you do it, right? Because there are multiple levels here. We have the ecosystem level, Matchday Universe, which I think there's certain token models that lend itself very well to it, and to make sure that all incentives are aligned, from value creation to in the ecosystem to also incentivizing the right behaviors. But we also have to think about the economy of the individual games themselves. And the individual games themselves need the space to breathe. They need the space to create an economy that's highly sustainable for them. Like, game economies are highly, highly tuned beasts to be able to,
even off-chain, you know, without even getting crypto into the equation.
They are highly tuned to maximize engagement and maximize, of course, monetization. And at the same time, you need to, that's why I say it's so important to give space for these highly tuned economies to exist. But the fact is, they are closed economies. They're closed economies that you have control over every single aspect, every single lever, inflation, deflation, what taps, what things that exist, all that are highly controlled, right? So I think the challenge, and it's definitely a challenge that I'm very confident we can overcome. The challenge is, how do you have kind of these sub-economies that exist in a wider ecosystem while still allowing each game to have an economy that is highly successful, but be able to plug into a larger open economy.
And what about mobile? Because as far as I see it, like that still feels like a huge untapped market from a crypto perspective, but particularly from a blockchain gaming perspective. You know, we had the NFL Rivals and Mythical Games CEO John Lennon on the podcast, and you're sitting there listening to all these stats, and you're almost thinking like, why is everyone thinking about like AAA or browser-based or whatever when like 50% of gaming revenue and 50% of gamers are on their phone? That's why gaming is such a big market. It's not because everyone buys a console, it's because everyone has a phone.
I think it's about the way, again, it's just about which door you take into this universe, right? So browser-based gaming, that was easy because if you talk about like a native Web3 game, that's the easiest way to get a wallet to start interacting with a Web3 game. From our perspective, we think that Web3 technology should be completely invisible to the users, right? And I think it's only much more recently that you're able to have technology to support that. So for example, being able to have chains that requires to have zero compromise on system performance and latency. You could do things like build systems that have eventual consistency of record on chain, for example. And you also have like I think now technology has evolved such that we can actually create a zero requirement to have to use an interactive blockchain if we don't want to, or if they don't want to, right? And technologies around that, for example, are non-custodial wallets that use account abstraction or like multi-party computation to handle key management. And that allows you to do a lot of things very invisibly to users. And once you're able to make kind of break away from, let's say, browser-based wallets or having to be tethered to even another wallet app for the core experience, then you're able to start thinking about, okay, what experiences can I build on mobile? What experiences can I build perhaps even on console as well? So I think it's also about just phases of technology that exist that allow you to make interacting on-chain a lot more invisible to users who really don't want to do that. But I completely agree with you. Mobile gaming is huge. You're talking about over 3 billion players globally.
We're also talking about like, you're talking about some of the technological side of things, but there's actually also the gatekeepers themselves, right? The Apples and the Androids, like how, you know, we probably live in a bit of an outdated world where Apple take 30% of every single cut of every single transaction in every single game. And I see a world probably where that starts to wean a little bit. You know, a lot of people don't know the background to that, but it was because old mobile carriers charged that much when someone utilized their, you know, third-party telecom provisions, and Apple basically just took that and made it digital. When they launched the App Store, they said, "Oh, you know, we used 30%," and that's what it's been ever since. And then obviously, like, there's an added tax, so you would say, on the crypto side of things, and the regulatory side for them is a little bit more uncertain. So there are a lot of barriers still, but we're getting there, right?
We're getting there. I mean, like for blockchain games, I think it's just getting started. Like a number of games I really admire, like Parallel TCG, Pirate Nation, and the sports world, So Rare and Mythical. They've either already done a push into mobile or are about to do so. Which is just great. And I think it's gonna it's about setting the standards and showing that, okay, this is an area that we should push into. I'm curious, what's your take on you've talked to so many folks. What's your take about why mobile has this kind of like somewhat strange yet familiar beast that people are just kind of poking a little bit at from
it's a good question.
From blockchain perspective?
this might be a sport in crypto first. So it's definitely fun. I think that if we take it like stack by stack, there's not been very good wallet infrastructure that's mobile native. There's not been clean on-ramps and off-ramps that are suited for mobile native use either. And then thirdly, I think it is that kind of like the scared of the big boss, the Apple, the Android. Like if you build a very successful game and it's walled off and you can't utilize some of the things that we discussed, the interop, the ownership, and so on and so forth, I do think that makes it harder for you. Like I go back to when I think Starbucks had their Odyssey program, right, which was a reasonable success, ended up closing down. But one of the things that actually they did was they didn't mint, you didn't mint the NFT, the ownable asset, until you took it out of ecosystem. And so everyone's having to like want to do this straight line thing. And when you hit mobile or you use a big corporation's IP or you run into legal battles, you end up zigzagging and like doing all this stuff to circumvent the Apple tax or going into like getting sued by this regulator and so on and so forth. I think that's basically why. I personally think that at some point in the next 3 years, I'd be shocked if Apple don't have a native crypto wallet. Like, maybe 5, maybe I'm being too optimistic, but like, I think, 3 years is kind of a safe bet. But like when someone so if we take a step back as well, we're seeing all this kind of stablecoin stuff proliferate and blossom right now. And that's outside of the banks. Like, I don't know if you're a JP Morgan Chase customer, but I'm a Chase UK customer. They don't have stablecoin rails within that bank. They don't have a stablecoin wallet within that bank. But if they did that tomorrow, what would the stablecoin supply in total go from 230 billion to whatever, right? And in the same way now, we have 500 million people on chain. How many Apple users are there? How many Android users are there? I think it's 6. It's basically everywhere outside of China with Huawei. Like, it's kind of like 6.5 billion people use those two products. If even one of those have anything akin to a wallet that accepts tokens, I think that will be a really, really big unlock, because then you can natively have you open a phone, you have a wallet embedded into it, you have control over that. Maybe it's custodial as well, but that makes things a lot easier for game developers. That's kind of my thinking. I think everyone's going to be building the blocks around until that happens.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that's a very sound prediction. You should definitely put that up somewhere. 3 years, Apple will have its own wallet built into the iPhone layer.
We'll do it for the 2026 predictions when I announce that. I've got one last question for you. We talked a little bit about, we just talked a lot about mobile. One thing that has exploded over the last, I want to say 18 months, is Telegram. We've written a bunch about it. Especially as games have come to the fore that are more sports related, that has become a huge avenue for a lot of game devs. What is your perspective there? Because I know NFL Rivals created a Telegram offshoot that's used as kind of, I'm suppose, like a top of funnel thing for them, and they have some native users in there. Sweet just announced that they're going to have a Telegram ecosystem called Score on Sweet, with a native token. 1 billion users, 200 million of them are supposedly gamers. The kind of DAU counts on some of these games are really, really, really high. What's your take, and how close have you been following that side of the Web3 gaming world?
Yeah, I mean, I look at Telegram games all the time, and I think Telegram, by virtue of being inherently social, because it's a messenger at its core, creates a very good breeding ground for games that can really tap into that social behavior. And mobile social gaming is growing. You can see, like, in the West, you look at kind of Telegram, you look at Discord really pushing hard on building Discord games. And you also see, if you play with WeChat games as well, right? WeChat games are extremely high fidelity if you go, and they actually load, for example, a Unity runtime within WeChat itself. So you can see extremely high fidelity games, but also being able to tap some of the inherently social experience that messengers provide. So when you kind of look back into what we're doing in Matchday, like the beauty of the Matchday universe is that we have built a lot of this underlying primitives and systems that let us spin up different games using the same set of assets, currencies, vanity items, and other all sorts of in-game items that exist. So for us, like we have an amazing pipeline of games, including some that would work perfectly as a Telegram game, or more broadly speaking, a messenger based game.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think you're kind of well positioned from that ecosystem universe perspective, because if someone who is a Telegram game dev wants to come along and build it, or as we kind of talked about NFL Rivals, they're having their own one, I think it's a pretty good opportunity. And I'm very interested to see how this ecosystem specifically develops as it pertains to sports related properties, because Ton, the blockchain is open, but the Telegram is closed, and its exclusive provider is Ton, that was started by Telegram in 2018. So, there is some kind of like one step in, one step out, one step in, decentralized but centralized type of thing going on there. But I think what you can't ignore is like that headline number of billion users and 200 million of them playing games, right?
The biggest thing that when you build any consumer product, especially games, you want to think about distribution, right? Distribution is always the hardest thing, always the thing that every game developer is focused on. And what Telegram provides with is distribution, and it's probably unoptimized distribution. So if you kind of go back, when I say unoptimized distribution, is I'm using an analogy of going back to the early Facebook days. If you remember Facebook social gaming when it first started, the games, the companies that built on there, talking like Zynga, Playfish, and so on, they harnessed the viral loops that were enabled by a platform, and probably to some extent abused it so much that the entire face of Facebook gaming changed so much over time. But you can see like that's what an unoptimized, from a platform standpoint, an optimized distribution channel can do for games. It creates new classes of games, new classes of interactions, and so on. So from a games perspective, it's very important to always be looking out for what's the next distribution channel that you can arbitrage. And I think a lot of folks are looking at Telegram gaming from that lens.
I think that's really well said. I think the Facebook gaming, Facebook to Telegram comp is really smart. But you can't underestimate how big a effect that could have as well. Was it? Am I right in thinking that at one point it was a third of Facebook's revenue, Zynga alone, or something like, I don't know, it was something crazy like that.
Some crazy style like that. Yeah.
So, sometimes when it works, and you kind of have to keep playing that way. Anyway, listen, Derrick, I think this is in the best way possible, the most all over the shop podcast we've had to date, because you said one thing, I wrote down like 5 notes, you said another, I wrote down another 5 notes. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on and subscribing and being a supporter all this time. Where can people find out more about you and Matchday?
Yeah, I'm on X at Derrick Ko. You can follow Matchday at Matchday on Instagram or on X as well, and download Matchday Champions. Just search for that exact phrase in the App Store, and please share any feedback that you have for me.
Awesome. And if you haven't already, you can subscribe to the newsletter.sportingcrypto.com, and you can find us on Sporting Crypto on socials. You can find me at Pet Barisha on LinkedIn as well. Just remember that none of what we have said during this show is financial or business or investment advice, and it's for informational purposes only. Web3 is underpinned by crypto, and crypto is volatile, meaning you can lose money if you're buying these assets personally or as a business. Please leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube, or wherever you're consuming this content. We'll have more Sporting Crypto content for you soon.